Welcome to GLHF. Today, we're going to show you the top 10 most controversial video games in the world. Looking through the list with games that are a decade apart, it's very interesting and eye-opening to see what we've considered offensive back then and what we consider offensive today. And keep in mind that this video is covering the controversies without endorsing any of them. Let's start this list off with number 10, Medal of Honor 2010. Medal of Honor is a veteran franchise in the gaming world for veterans. The original Medal of Honor was created to realistically depict war and was even endorsed by the Congressional Medal of Honor Society for its accuracy and efforts to make it an authentic experience. Several years later, when the series had a reboot, it sparked controversy. In the 2010 version of the game, you could play as a Taliban soldier in the multiplayer section of the games. Even though the war in Iraq and Afghanistan had started to die down, it was still an open wound in the American society that caused an immediate backlash against the game allowing to play as the Taliban. That backlash was successful and the Taliban faction was renamed, so players were no longer playing as the Taliban. Number 9. The Last of Us 2. The actual controversy around the game is still going as we release this video, so new details may emerge in the future that are not a part of this video. The first Last of Us game, in the eyes of many, was a perfect 10 out of 10 game and did not need any sequel. The Last of Us 2 was embroiled in controversy from its trailer to launch. Starting from the 2018 E3 trailer that depicted Ellie, the protagonist of the game, kissing her girlfriend, which felt like forced diversity pandering to many fans of the series, as well as to an audience that is completely new to the game. The controversy had restarted when leaks of the game came out by either a disgruntled employee or a security breach. The leaks confirmed to many that the story would be compromised in order to pander and fill diversity quotas. The fact that the studio behind the game had a ridiculous turnover rate made it look like a lot of the employees quit because the game took a more political approach. Combine it with the fact that Neil Druckmann being tied to controversial figures like Anita Sarkeesian did not help at all. The game is out, and the leaks are definitely true. The only way to accurately describe the story without any spoilers is to imagine the next Mario game coming out and you played as a Goomba for half the game and curb-stomped Luigi, then switched over to Mario, only to have him high-five the Goomba at the end. On top of that, there's an adult scene in the game that is a self-insert of Neil Druckmann and that he was doing the motion capture for both roles, but at the time of making this video, that's just a rumor. Before we move on to number 8, make sure to give this video a thumbs up. Your ratings and engagement with the video help the channel by promoting it on YouTube. Number 8. Star Wars Battlefront 2. Battlefront 2 has gone through a huge redemption arc since the initial controversy, but it's still a record-breaking controversy that holds the most downvoted comment in Reddit history. Considering the fact that this game has Disney and EA behind it, it shouldn't have been a surprise at all that they would milk it for every single cent. The game was riddled with loot boxes that you had to purchase, and those of you that did could gain access to a clear gameplay advantage and characters like Darth Vader being locked behind 40 hours of gameplay. The game having its progression tied so closely to the loot box system, which is a gambling mechanic you have to pay real money for, had caused a very understandable backlash. This prompted the worst attempt at deflection by a company, resulting in the most downvoted comment in Reddit history with 667,000 downvotes. It's now almost 3 years later, and the game has changed completely due to the backlash. All the loot boxes are strictly tied to cosmetics and cannot be purchased with real money, and you can also directly purchase the cosmetics without going through the gambling aspect of the loot boxes. They also unlocked all the heroes for everyone instead of going through a 40-hour grind for each individual character. The game is not a 10 out of 10 by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a good game that most fans would enjoy, and it probably has the best redemption arc in all of gaming history. Number 7. Battlefield 5. Battlefield 5 is another EA title on this list, but it had an opposite end to the story when you compare it to Battlefront 2. The controversy started when the Battlefield 5 trailer came out and it depicted a female soldier with a prosthetic hook in what seemed to be a World War II environment. There is a video of Dr. Disrespect reacting to the trailer and perfectly encapsulating everything that's wrong with the game. Him being confused whether or not it's a steampunk universe or a World War II scenario.
I'm just trying to figure out if this bridge was damaged from the war or if that's the period. Like, is this an apocalyptic steampunk period. I'm just trying to figure out what the hell is this. World War I, World War II? Is this like a sort of like a futuristic civil war in the United States? Is it Cold War era? Because I feel like they're just they're running out of ideas.
We now know that it was a World War II game that engaged in historical revisionism, and players did not appreciate it at all. Battlefield 5 is one of the biggest PR disasters in history, and it should be studied for many reasons. The first one is, why would they forsake their core audience that enjoyed a semi-military shooter game and try to create their own diverse version of World War II, which, let's face it, is not inclusive at all. The second reason is how the CEO antagonized their audience and told them not to buy the game, which resulted in exactly that. 50% lower pre-order sales that later resulted in the biggest failure of this franchise history. The game was actually pretty decent in terms of gameplay, and was considered to have the best gunplay by many of the players. There was also a Battle Royale mode that could have been interesting, but was buried by the lack of initial content in the game and the low player count because of all the controversy. Battlefield 1 was a great World War I game that had some historical inaccuracies due to diversity elements, but it was still successful. This is why it's so weird to see how they tried to make Battlefield 5 a World War II steampunk inclusive game so they could sell you tons of useless cosmetics and try to court a bigger player base while completely ignoring the core audience of the game. Number 6. Mass Effect Andromeda. This is the fourth and last title on this list by EA. Despite what many may think, this is not a bad game, even with the terrible facial animations that should never be a part of a AAA franchise like Mass Effect. But considering the 18-month development cycle they had, it's very much understandable. The main controversy in the game was the weird character modeling choices. If you take a look at the male version of the player, he has the typical Hollywood good looks, and he is very similar to the original model for the character. If by any chance you pick the female protagonist, all the presets are plain looking at best and mostly downright ugly. The intention and the reality of the situation became clearer once you take a look at the original model compared to the in-game character. This is an attempt to court the feminist crowd by not depicting quote-unquote unrealistic beauty standard through uglifying a character that was modeled by a real woman. There's nothing wrong with attempting to make the character more average looking, but why didn't they do the same when it came to the male character who looks better and exactly like the male model? Number 5. Postville 2. Postville 2 is a very easy pick to make for this list considering how bloody, violent, and the amount of gore it contains. This game gives you a variety of weapons to indiscriminately kill and mutilate both armed and unarmed NPCs. On top of the violence, you have the option to urinate on your victims, whether they're alive or not. It's quite understandable why some might find this game offensive, and that's why it's so controversial. Number 4. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. The Call of Duty series is filled with controversy, and it used to have way more with their campaigns. Take a look, for example, in Black Ops 1, where the protagonist of the game is implicated in the JFK assassination. Modern Warfare 2 was controversial for many reasons, including an unbalanced and unpatched multiplayer experience filled with exploits. But the main reason we put it in this video is because of the famous mission and meme No Russian. This mission was so offensive in the eyes of many to the point where you could skip it entirely, but you would lack the context for the whole game. This game came out in 2009, which was a less sensitive time, but even back then it was considered offensive. The mission starts with you going as an undercover CIA operative in a terrorist group that shoots up a Russian airport indiscriminately. This mission creates a lot of plot holes that make you question the inclusion of it in the game. Why would you put a mission filled with plot holes if it's not strictly for the shock value and offensiveness that will give the game free promotion? Number 3. Hearthstone. Unlike the other games on this list, while the controversy is tied to the game, it's not because of the game or any of its content. The controversy started when the competitive player Blitzchung showed support of the Hong Kong protests, which resulted in him getting banned from the game for a year and his prize money revoked in an attempt to not offend China and court the Chinese market. What made it worse was the double standards that Blizzard showed when they didn't ban American players who did the same thing, at first at least. After being called out for their hypocrisy, Blizzard had banned the American players from competing in their tournaments for 6 months. The fact that this ban happened in close proximity to Daryl Morey, the GM of the Houston Rockets, bending the knee to China together with the NBA for showing support to the Hong Kong protest did not help Blizzard at all. A foreign country having a censorship effect on the US, which has more laws to protect free speech and protest than any other country, was the worst landmine for Blizzard to step on. This is the most controversial game just because of their publisher. Number 2. GTA San Andreas. The Grand Theft Auto series is filled with controversy due to the game's violent and criminal nature, together with the satire that is a huge part of this game. Today, we'd like to focus specifically on GTA San Andreas because of a specific mod that was hidden in the game. The Hot Coffee mod will enable the player to go inside the house of one of CJ's girlfriends after their date and make babies, let's just say. The mod can only be accessed by a patch on PC. That didn't matter for the ESRB because that's content that is still part of the disc, which made them change the classification of the game from mature to adult only, which is a classification you'd see mostly on sex games. This made Rockstar Games recall all their discs, remove the content, and republish the game so it will have a mature rating. It's a bit unfair considering it's locked content and you can only access by tampering with the game and patching it, but this might have been the right choice considering the fact that the PlayStation 2 ruled the gaming world back then and GTA San Andreas ended up the best-selling PS2 title. Before we move on to number 1, guys, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our future videos. Number 1. Mortal Kombat 1. Just like GTA, the Mortal Kombat series is very controversial, mostly due to how violent the game can be. The fatalities in Mortal Kombat are an insult to injury mechanic that is unique to the game and was a part of the first Mortal Kombat game. Each character has an ability to brutally maim and kill their enemies when they win the match. Parents weren't so big on their kids witnessing Sub-Zero tearing out someone's spine in the arcade or in their own home. Mortal Kombat, together with several other games, prompted the US to threaten the gaming industry to regulate itself, or else they will face government regulation, which resulted in the Entertainment Software Rating Board, or ESRB for short. Many consider the ESRB to be created because of Mortal Kombat, which is considered mature by the ESRB. That didn't stop Mortal Kombat from leaning into the violent aspect of the game and creating even more creative and fun ways to brutally maim and kill your enemy. It's a shame the ESRB is not actually doing its work today and enables games like FIFA and NBA 2K20, which are literal casinos that are rated E for everyone. What do you think is the most controversial game in history? Make sure to leave it in the comments, even if it's not on this list. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. We post a new video at least once a week, so make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of them. Good luck and have fun.